What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the stream. It's Tuesday. We're getting tactical, and apparently my chat box is broken. That's unfortunate. If we flip over to our other screen here, it's also broken here. Well, that's unfortunate. Sorry, everybody. We might do without a chat box today. Unfortunately, we have everyone over in the YouTube chat over on the side, so you can go check you out over there. But it is the time for the T5S2 Invitational. This is, for those who don't know, this is a biannual event for the T5S2 online tournament circuit. So this is for online 40k. It's the event circuit that I run and take scores from a bunch of different event servers for not only the events that I run, but also events sort of the world over. So you find usually dozens and dozens of tournaments end up submitting their results and ends up creating a pool of usually about 400 to 500 players. And then we take the top 16 every season, twice a year, and have them fight to the death. Now, this is, in fact, the last one that will be biannual. We're going to be moving to an annual schedule in the future. But if you see me live quite a bit over the next couple days, that's going to be why, because I stream basically all of the games that I can from the Invitational. So, I mean, these are some of the most dedicated and hardest working and most skilled online 40k players in the world. So it would be remiss if we were to miss their gameplay. So I've already have some VODs scheduled, or some games scheduled, and if you go over to the invitational page, tts40k.com/invitational is the name. Any games that you get scheduled will be posted up in here, so you can keep track. There'll be a YouTube link so that you can get into the lobby, the waiting room for that event to start, and then we'll go live there at the prescribed time. So starting that one with a pretty spicy matchup, Tyrannus versus Eldari, but a very, very different Eldari list than what you would expect. So what we're going to be doing today in lieu of a normal Tactical Tuesday discussion is just discussing the lists in the Invitational, going over the details and some of the strengths and weaknesses of each one. There are a couple duplicate factions, but I don't believe any duplicate lists, which is good, and they all have kind of a pretty significant difference between them. Now, I did do a breakdown of lists. If you want IRL event coverage, I did a breakdown of undefeated lists, or at least top placing lists from this past weekend.
Was looking at that killer can list you pointed out last stream. It's fun seeing some odd lists stand out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the killer can list is spicy. Definitely the most efficient way to put rocket launches in your list, I guess, which is pretty cool. Besides, like, I guess Grot Mega Tanks have a pretty efficient rocket launcher too. But yeah, the Orc mini vehicles is pretty cool. Hopefully that they see some play. I'm a little bit worried that they get pushed out by the more powerful stuff, but I do think Orcs are one of those factions that could get really powerful if the more kind of the sillier stuff in the metagame gets cut down. Right now it's pretty clearly Eldar and Genestealer Cult, but Orcs, Thousand Suns, some of these other factions there are like one step below, and I think end up getting really interesting if those top factions get knocked down. So, I like diving into the odd list, so hopefully we'll have some more of that pretty soon. So, yeah, that's what we're going to be discussing today. So we have 16 lists for the top 16 players. We also have a schedule of events right here. So events are going to start to be streamed starting tomorrow. And I hope you come join me. 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern is going to be the first one. We then have another one that evening. We don't have anything else scheduled for the rest of the week currently, but that is likely to change. And obviously, those will go up onto their own VOD pages and onto the stream schedule on this website as soon as I know when they are. It's all up to the players to schedule their own games, and then sort of I work around their schedule. So it is it's totally up to them and when they can play. Which is why we don't have the concrete schedule right now. But let's dive right in. Like I said, we do have a couple duplicate factions. The first one being Genestealer Cults. But all of the Genestealer cult lists have some pretty important differences. So this one is King Kong Fury from Greek Hammer, the Greek Hammer team. He's running an Abominant in an Aberrant squad. So oftentimes you'll see this slot, and I'm going to zoom out. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Oftentimes you'll see that spot being taken by a Biophagus, because the Biophagus is a little bit of a cheaper include to take this Inscrutable Cunning. Oh, Inky's here to talk about Aberrants. She's like, oh, and a genetic monstrosity. I know all about those. Yeah, we know, Inky. We know what's up. Let's say hello to the kitty cat. Say hi to chat, Inky. Are you gonna show up? No, she's being shy. All right, fair enough. Well, we tried. Valiant effort was made. But the essentially what you want is a character to go into a big aberrant unit and to allow those aberrants to forward deploy, because they are, with 3 wounds each and a 4+ feel no pain, that unit is like sort of wildly difficult to kill, especially since you can use Return to the Shadows on them to make them difficult to shoot at, or even impossible if they're too far away. So a lot of armies can't really deal with this big brick, and then they can kind of dominate the mid-board early game, and especially push back any enemy deep strike denial is the big thing. But speaking of deep strike denial, we also have a Clamavus in this list, and this is kind of a little bit of a mirror breaker. This guy has a big 12-inch anti-deep strike aura, so he can kind of deploy in one of these utility units to or at least even deploy by himself, honestly, if you are going to be planning to use Return to the Shadows with him, or one with the Shadows, the anti-shooting stratagem for Genestealer cults, on him to make him unshootable, and that can allow him to block off a ton of real estate that other deep strikers could come in. And the important thing there is that, obviously, if you give yourself an untargetability effect like Lone Operative or the Stratagem, and enemies can't deploy within 12 inches of you, there's no way for them to shoot you without like an out-of-phase movement effect. So like Thousand Suns might be able to do it, but that might be the only faction. So this guy can basically just like sort of hold down the fort against a lot of deep strikers and prevent them from being able to kill him. In addition, his effect, his Scrambler Array ability, also overrides anyone else's closer than 9-inch deep strike. So things like Inceptors with their, I think it's called Meteoric Descent is the name of the Inceptor ability. We can grab their data sheet here. Allows them to come within 3 inches of things, but that gets overwritten.
Do you do list reviews/tips?
Do I do list reviews /tip? Oh, for like like somebody wants to submit their list to me for feedback. Yeah, I do, usually for a super chat, Dominator. If you're interested. Because it's included in the rules commentary, that if you have a denial effect, it actually overrides someone's closer than 9-inch deep strike effect. So things like Inceptor squads, Grey Knights with their closer deep strike, Denizens of the Warp from Chaos Demons, and even other Genestealer cults, which can come in closer thanks to their stratagem. All of those are overridden by the Clamavus here. So that guy's pretty useful in the mirror. The Nexos is very important. He grants you free stratagems and multiple uses of stratagems, which is, just like super important for the entirety of the faction. He is what you want to be doing in Genestealer Cult, and especially a list like this, because we see a lot of these neophyte hybrid bricks included. They tend to be hit. They have the opportunity to hit super hard because they can get sustained hits from their subfaction ability or their detachment ability when they deep strike. They can get rerolls to hit from a Primus, and they can get AP bonuses from Achilles Ridge Runners, which we also have in the list. But then there's multiple stratagems. There's Perfect Ambush, which allows them to get +1 ballistic skill, and there is I don't remember what the name of the stratagem is. I think it's like Coordinated Assault or something that allows them to get +1 to wound as well, targeting a single enemy model. So those are both stratagems, so they end up bleeding you 2 CP per turn. The Nexos gives you that one of those stratagems for free, and lets you double up on the stratagem. In addition, they also give you stratagems free per turn. It's kind of like it's a Gilliman effect. It's better than Rites of Battle, in fact, which is kind of wild. Which allows you to Overwatch for free in your opponent's turn. And depending on the FAQ, you can actually use this to Overwatch multiple times. We're not going to be doing that for this event, so you can only Overwatch a single time per turn. Still, he doesn't override the additional restriction on Overwatch, but because these Neophyte Hybrid squads can also get rerolls from having a Primus attached to them, and the Nexos can actually attach alongside a Primus, then their Overwatch is extremely dangerous because they have tons and tons and tons of shots. We can take a look at their datasheet here too. If they're including the build that we have in this unit, we're rocking grenade launchers and seismic cannon. Sometimes you'll see some flamers in there in place of the grenade launchers, just so you don't have to roll the hit, but the grenade launchers are super powerful, especially, again, as a mirror. You know, in the mirror, they're also good because they have a blast profile, so they can shoot at other enemy these big bricks of 20 models and clear them out. So you have 12 guys with just the regular firearms, and then you have 4 dudes with grenade launchers, probably firing strength 9 AP to big D3 damage shots. And then you have the seismic cannons, which each fire, if you're within 12, which you should be because you can deep strike basically wherever you want, they should fire 6 shots at AP1 D3 damage. You can stack that to +2 AP, so you're firing AP4 with the grenade launchers and AP 3 with the seismic cannons, and +1 to wounds. They wound basically everything on 4s or 5s. So the amount of damage that once the combo is assembled on these Neophyte Hybrid squads is super insane. And all of the Genestealer Call lists that we're going to look at today are all running a ton of Neophyte Hybrids. So this one is running 1, 2, 3, 4 units of Neophyte Hybrids, plus that Aberrant squad. There are also a couple units of Adeline Jackals. These ones mostly just for... are just for they scout moves, so they can do complete tactical objectives on the first turn. Sometimes you'll see larger units of Adeline Jackals with with like Alphases attached to them, but we're not going to be running that today. It's just 2 units of 5. They can do a little bit of damage with their mortal wounds running by people, but generally speaking, you're just going to use them as a fast unit that can be thrown away and do actions and stuff like that. So, it's good stuff. How does one win versus Genestealer Call in the current meta? Yeah, you have to have a lot of technology. Basically, units that move during your shooting phase or can set up during your shooting phase are really important because they restrict where your opponent can place respawn tokens. So that's a big deal. In addition, to a little bit of a lesser extent, damage reduction effects, so like -1 damage from Redemptor Dreadnoughts or like Magnus the Red, those can also... These units are very heavily reliant on their D3 damage weapons. They shoot 28 D3 damage shots, which is, in fact, more than all of their other shots combined. So if you can reduce the damage from those, that's a pretty big hit as well on their output. And then you need to be packing blast as well on top of that in order to deal with this stuff. So it's a combination of things. I won't lie, it's extremely difficult right now because they're so efficient and they respawn so quickly.
Where should I send the list?
You can send it to me in Discord. Makes sense. If you're in the Discord server, you can PM me, and I should be able to get it. Yeah, so yeah, part of the issue with Genestealer Call, or the reason that they're so strong, is that if you build into them, you are kind of hurting your matchup into other super heavy armor factions. So that's one of the reasons that they're really good. there are units, so like in Tyranids, if you're playing Zoanthropes, and Space Marines, if you're playing like Desolation Squads, which you probably are anyway because they're so good, there are units that pack both anti-tank and blast weapons, and I think that's going to be kind of the future, is that you're looking at taking units that are good in both roles. They can both sweep an infantry squad if they need to. They're effective on Overwatch, and they can also, they're not terrible at shooting at tanks as well, or big knights and stuff like that. And I think that's where it's going to have to point. But you do need a very specific set of tools in order to be able to beat Genestealer cults very often. So that is Mr. King Kong Fury, and we're going to see some similar... We'll run through the other Genestealer cult lists, and I will go from there. Oh, looks like I got your list, Mr. Dominator. We'll take after we look at these Genestealer cult lists, we'll take a quick look at it. Thank you so much for the super chat, by the way. I don't want to get off my train of thought here. So that's King Kong Fury. We also have Danny Porter over here is also playing Genestealer cults, and this one is a little bit more of a classic variety of list. It's running triple Nexus, double Primus, so we just have tons of uses of free stratagems. We have tons of full rerolls available to these Neophyte squads, and then we're basically just like front-loading these Neophyte squads. So 5 units of 20. This is the most Horde mode list. We're really sacrificing the other units in the composition in order to get these additional infantry units in there. We do have 2 Achilles Ridge Runners. These guys are really important because they are taking Survey Augurs, so they can grant ignore cover to a unit. And then they also, with their Crossfire ability, if they shoot at something and hit it, then it grants all of your other units plus 1 AP against that target. And so you take them with their mortar profile, so their indirect fire profile, so you can't escape from the Ridge Runner. And all the Ridge Runner needs to do is score a hit with that mortar in order to grant the plus 1 AP. So those guys are super powerful support units for all of the infantry squads. You don't need it quite as much, or at least you don't need the Survey Augur quite as much when they deep strike in, because they get ignore cover naturally, but they it is still helpful for the units who are on the table. We're also running Acolytes with demolition charges. These guys, especially if you're using your repeat stratagems to improve their ballistic skill, is super good. The demolition charges are high volume and high strength, but kind of middling. They're only ballistic skill 5. But because if you want to, you can attach the Primus into them, or you can give them +1 to hit with the perfect ambush when they deep strike on. You can make the demolition charges relatively consistent, and they just do so much insane damage. They also grant you the assault keyword, so you can, or the assault ability, so you can advance and perform actions if you need to. But generally speaking, like this unit firing 12 plus 4d6, so you're averaging 26 shots at strength 12, AP2, 2 damage, will mostly blow up any one thing that you end up targeting. They also get reroll ones to hit and wound if with their, I guess it's all attacks thanks to their ability. So you don't need to buff their accuracy too much in order to get them to a pretty efficient point. They probably lose the demolition charge guys, or there's a reasonable chance they do after they've shot because they're hazardous, but it doesn't. That's fine. They've done enough damage at that point, so you can let them go. So these units end up being extremely dangerous too, just as throwaway units. They'll respawn and they lose the demolition charges once they respawn, but to my knowledge, they still retain the assault ability, so they can still then respawn thanks to Cult Ambush and then run and go do stuff depending on what tactical objectives you draw. So they're still extremely useful even after they've thrown their bombs and then been killed. Would it be worth to run heavy flamers against Genestealer Cult? Yeah, not really. I think that flamers in general are a little tough to get on target because you really want weapons that are good in Overwatch, but that Overwatch beyond, like 12 inches or so. And the other thing to think about is that these neophyte squads, right, are all the damage. Like I said, 26 shots out of the whole gamut come from the D3 damage special weapons, the grenade launchers and the seismic cannons. So they have 11 or 12 models in the unit that they can lose before they start actually losing their damage output. And it's not like the firearm guys are worthless, but they are still pretty useful. So you need to be able to basically like one-tap the unit in Overwatch in order for it to be to really matter. So like packing a couple flamers isn't really going to help. And even if you have a unit of guys with flamers, all they need to do is get their dudes within range of 1 or 2 of them. And even if you Overwatch with those 12-inch range weapons, you're only going to get a couple in range, so you're not going to kill enough that it matters. The other thing is that the Cult Icon, if we bring back their data sheet as well, the Cult Icon has a really awkward timing, and it actually makes it it makes the unit incredibly resistant to Overwatch, and can actually make it really bad for you if you Overwatch them. It is... How did I just lose this data sheet? There we go. The Cult Icon triggers in the reinforcement step. So it's not at the end of the reinforcement step. It's just any time within it. So you can, after you deep strike and the Overwatch triggers immediately in response to the deep strike, you can then use the Cult Icon after the Overwatch has been resolved. So your opponent can shoot you, remove some of your models, and then you just Cult Icon and get them back and potentially put them closer to your target than they were before. So you have to be able to kill basically the entire unit for it to really matter. So Overwatch isn't a really good answer to these guys, which is unfortunate, I think. You can Overwatch, with big blast weapons and full rerolls and stuff. You will kill them, and you will kill enough for it to matter. But taking a couple of flamers isn't really the answer. You really need to lead really heavily into anti-infantry. All right, moving down the line, we actually down here at the bottom of the bracket here, Ash C versus Justin S both got paired against each other. So we have a Genestealer called Mirror, which is going to be pretty funky. One interesting thing, I know somebody was pointing it out in chat earlier today, and we had a discussion about it on the Discord. The Nexos has an ability to move cult ambush tokens around. So those are the tokens that get placed after a Genestealer cult unit with the cult ambush ability is destroyed, which importantly is not the characters or vehicles. Characters or vehicles don't respawn. I saw a lot of people misplaying that over the last couple of weeks, and they don't have the ability on their data sheet, so they don't come back when they die. But the Nexos can move cult ambush tokens in each command phase, and you can actually move. It doesn't specify whose cult ambush tokens you can move. So both players with Nexuses are going to be able to move each other's cult ambush tokens potentially, which can create situations where you can move them into a position to get killed, which is pretty interesting. Because if any model moves within 9 inches, then they're going to destroy them. But Ash C's here is list is super interesting. She's bringing a Jackal Alphys, but there are no actual Adeline Jackals in the list. It's basically all Acolyte and Neophyte hybrids. So there's none of the other specialist units. There's just 3 Achilles Ridge Runners in addition. And this model is basically just going to be, once the units with Primuses are destroyed, the Jackal Alphys can come in and tap a unit. If it hits with its sniper rifle, then it grants reroll 1s to hit for your ranged attacks for the remainder of the turn, or the phase. So it basically works like an exocrine, essentially. And it has a fire and fade mechanic built in. So after it shoots, it can move 6 inches. So it's even hard to pin down. And that makes the Alphys really good just independently. Even though it doesn't have lone operative or anything, it's still going to be useful enough that it can help you support the rest of your shooting. It also, the ability to shoot and then move is also good, because you can wipe a unit, shoot with the Alphys, and then if they place the token near the Alphys within 15 inches, you can move closer to the token. So it also gives you a little bit more control over where other ambush tokens place. It turns out Genestealer Cult are really good at countering other Genestealer Cult, which is a little bit funky. They have a lot of abilities that do so. So from there, triple Primus to go into the infantry units and grant them rerolls to hit. We also have 3 Reductus Saboteurs. These are probably, if I were to throw out a generalization, I think they're probably the best lone operative in the game, just because of the amount of sheer amount of damage they can do. So they're a lone operative, so they can't be shot outside 12 inches. They have stealth even if you're within 12 inches. They don't respawn, so once you get up to them and kill them, they do actually die. But until then, they're actually super difficult to interact with because they have an indirect fire weapon that they can just fire consistently over the course of the game. So they're already sort of printing value even before you get to the point that they're actually in danger. Even when they get within 12 inches, once per game, they can use their remote explosives to do D3 plus 3 mortal wounds to you, and then, or their planted explosives, excuse me, and then they can also use the grenade strat in your shooting phase without spending CP. So a Reductus Saboteur, you being used offensively, can shoot a blast, indirect fire profile, plant an explosive for D3 plus 3 mortals, and then grenade for another 2 to 3 mortals. So they're probably good for like 6 or 7 mortal wounds on average, plus an attack. And that's only even if you want to play them aggressively. They're only 55 points, so you don't have to. But it's basically impossible to not regain your 55 points with this unit, because it's going to kill 40 to 50 points of models just by itself by using its planted explosive, and that's not even including the indirect fire that's shooting at you all game. So these guys are incredible. But we're also taking even more lone operative units in this particular army because we're also running triple Sanctus as well. So that's pretty interesting. These guys have a very weird profile. They have an anti-infantry 3+ knife, or as you can see, you can choose either the knife or the sniper rifle. And the sniper rifle is just a 3 damage anti-psyker rifle. It's not that exciting. But they have 6 attacks with anti-infantry 3 with the knife. And at the beginning of the game, they choose a single target to get devastating wounds against. So they can be anti-infantry 3 devastating. So in a 3+, they just inflict a mortal wound. So heavily armored infantry squad, these guys actually kind of tear apart really quickly. It is only one of them. So what they're trying to target is pretty... signposted. Your opponent can kind of react to it, but in addition, everything in the army deep strikes, so they could just run around and do actions and stuff and be another 50-point lone operative that you can use to deep strike in funky places, to complete action secondaries, and to hold down objectives without being able to be shot at. So altogether, just a pretty solid profile, I think. It is a little bit unfortunate they don't really have any range profile, but that's probably fine. And then just a ton of Acolyte and Neophyte hybrids, again, for this one, and the 3 Achilles Ridge Runners that we discussed. And this list is up against Justin S.'s list, which is, I think, running a little bit more of the classic build that we talked about at the beginning. So this one has the Biophagus with Inscrutable Cunning, so that gives whatever unit he's attached to infiltrate, so he and his unit can go up in the front. And we do have at the bottom over here, way down at the bottom, a unit of Aberrants for him to attach into to forward deploy. We don't have any Jackals, but the rest of the list is mostly made up of Neophytes and Acolytes, just like we discussed previously. This one is running triple Nexos double Primus as well, but only one of the Reductus Saboteurs, so much more less focused on doing the funky lone operative stuff, and more about actually just killing you with mass infantry. All right, I have a list to look at. Let me pull that up real quick. I think I'm going to put it into a paste bin here so that we can take a quick peek. So this is Imperial Knights. This is what we're looking at today. Here we go. Ooh, double Crusader. That's pretty spicy. I think one thing I know, in a list that we'll talk about momentarily, one thing I know some people are on right now is the Acastus Castigator. In place of the second Crusader. So we have Mythic Hero right now. So that lets the Crusader double Bondsman. Can actually pull up the Crusader's profile right here too. Yeah, you are. Let me know how you like this data site overlay, by the way, chat. I took a little while to put this together, but I hopefully will use it for live streams in the future when I commentate games. So we'll have some access to the data sites right on the stream, which will be good. So the Crusaders can grant +1 to hit to the Armigers, and we are running 4 Armiger Helverins. Hot diggity damn. +2 Warglaves. I think that might be too many Helverins if I were to throw out a piece of feedback. The thing that I found with the Armiger Helverins is that because the Titanic units are towering, right, they can interact with your opponent for the majority of the game, whereas the Helverins, you end up putting a lot of points into these units that can't do that. So your opponent is still then incentivized to hide and blanks at that point like 600 points of your shooting, which is a lot of shooting to lose. Plus, the Helverins are really bad once they're up on objectives, because they don't really have a melee profile, right? The Helverin itself is it's good at shooting, but much less so in melee. It only has a strength 6 AP 0 melee attack. So once your opponent gets up and starts engaging with it, it can shoot them, but it's then -1 to hit. It doesn't really kick them very well. Whereas the Armiger Warglaves are much more aggressively oriented, and I think you'll find that 2 Helverins and 4 Warglaves is probably going to serve you a lot better. If that was to be my first piece of feedback. The one thing about this list that I can notice, and one thing that oftentimes Knights lists run into, is that if your opponent, they're just eating damage from the Crusaders for the whole game, depending on how their terrain looks and whether they're able to hide from towering units. But once they deal with the Armigers, then you don't have that much that actually pushes them unless you have Warglaves. So they can kind of play in the sprinkler in the middle of the table, and you're not on objectives at that point because you don't really want to put the Helverins on objectives. And then we have a Calexis Assassin and a Vindicare Assassin. What's the total? What is this total points at? Are we at 2,000? I don't know about the Calexis Assassin. I'm not even sure I've looked at the Calexis Assassin that much. Let's take a quick gander. I don't think I have Imperial Agents downloaded yet, so I have to go find their datasheet the old-fashioned way. I mean, obviously, the one thing that a lot of these lists are running currently, the Vindicare is good. Like, don't get me wrong, the Vindicare is excellent. But the Calidus Assassin, the other one, the difference is that it's about 30 points more expensive than the other Knight variety, or the other, Assassin varieties, because it has so many support effects. So the Calexis Assassin forces battle shock checks on people and has a 2+ feel no pain against psychic attacks. Yeah, I don't know if that's super interesting. Obviously, all of the assassins have lone operative and deep strike. So, or this one at least has deep strike. This one, the Calidus says. So they can be used to sort of fill the role of utility units. But I wonder if you wouldn't be better served just taking some cheap infantry in that slot. I know like everyone's running exaction squads right now. I don't know how much some of the other Imperial Agent infantry are, like Inquisitorial Henchmen. Can you play them without an Inquisitor? Looks like it. And or taking a Calidus Assassin. And if you cut a couple of Armiger Helverins for Warglaves, you actually do open up a couple extra points as well. So we're at 165 plus... see if there's any space to add stuff in here. So it's 975 for the two big knights. That's so expensive, but they're so good. I've been finding that a lot of times my games against towering, almost anything towering, not just Imperial Knights, but almost all my games against Towering are just okay. So this is at exactly 200 or 2000, excuse me. But we don't. There's not too much like wiggle room to play around with, unfortunately. Yeah, so I'd probably cut a couple Warglaives or Hellbrints for Warglaives, and I would probably cut one of the Assassins for just more basic troops. The other thing that you can do is, like, you can just, even if you don't feel like you need the backline objective holding with basic infantries, you can just put them in strategic reserve, and then they can still complete secondaries late game if your opponent doesn't screen you out. And they're not really going to screen you out if all you're doing is representing scoring with like units of 5 like mooks. You can do that with the Calexis because it deep strikes, but you only get one entity at that point rather than 2. Oh, we're just doing list review today, I guess.
Bored at work and would like to hear your thoughts on my latest tournament list I sent you.
Okay, let's take a look. Oh, already in Paceman. Amazing. Thank you for the super chat, Kellen, by the way. What were we saying on chat here? You can screen the blips versus aircraft. The blips don't die, but they can't spawn in. I guess that is funny, yeah, because they have to go within an inch of the blip, right? And then not outside 9 of enemies. So if an enemy is like wholly within 9 of the blip, or wholly within 8 of the blip, I guess, then you're just like, you're kind of screwed. That's very funny. All right, we got a Sempiternal Weave Catacomb Command Barge. So he grants, if I remember correctly, extra objective control to everybody around him. I'm in the process of adding Necrons into my overlay here, by the way, chat. So I don't have everything nicely laid out, but we can bring him up. I think that's right. Yeah, nailed it. Woo. So yeah, +1 objective control to everybody within 6. Additional objective control effects. I wonder. I bet that's good. The interesting thing about the extra objective control effects is that I found that they are not that useful because it oftentimes is like either you control the objective or you don't. And there's very few times where stacking objective control matters. That said, for a slow army, the way a lot of people deal with slow armies is just like feed OC2 chaff into you. And being +1 OC on a bunch of stuff that's on an objective means that like 5 or 10 OC2 models can't steal it from you. So it's probably better in Necrons than it is in other factions. We have a Hexmark Destroyer with Sovereign Coronal. That's just a solid include. Dude shoots a lot. It can't be shot back, and then also gives you +1 to hit on all your dudes because you count as being with having an attached character. Nemesor Zandrek, a Hypermaterial Ablator. So that's grants cover and stealth, I think, if you're being attacked from outside 12. On an Overlord, 2 Technomancers, 2 units of Crypto Thralls, 1 Canoptic Reanimator, 5 Death Marks. I love the Death Marks, actually. Anything that naturally deep strikes and is cheap right now is good. 3 Doomsday Arcs, 2 individual Locust Destroyers, Heavy Destroyers, 2 units of 10 Lich Guard, 1 unit of Tomb Blade, 2 units of Tomb Blades. One thing I would consider, they are a little bit awkward right now because they don't go through walls, but I know that Scarab Swarms are very popular currently to fill the role of like these Tomb Blades, where they don't get Scout, so they don't move as fast, obviously, but they, you can get 2 units for the price of 1 Tomb Blade unit. And so just being able to like zoom them back and complete like investigate signals or the other one, like deploy teleport Hummer, excuse me, is also pretty useful. And it's less dear if you lose them, because I know that one thing that can happen is that Necrons kind of get poked apart on the sides. If you lose the stuff that isn't the 2 big bricks, so like the destroyers and the Tomb Blades and the the death marks, it can be difficult to complete your secondaries. But it just depends on how much you get. Zandrek, I think, is the one character I'm not familiar with in that whole stack there. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, I don't have him labeled. No, Zandrek, no, why? Okay, here he is. We found him. We found him, chat. Okay, so he grants a random buff to somebody, either sustain 1, lethal, or devastating, and he has a Vect. Okay, yeah, that's just solid. I like him. Let's go. That's good. An 85-point Vect is pretty sweet, and he also has an additional benefit. What's not to love? Good job, Nemesis Zandrek. I guess the question is whether or not he's better than Imhotep, right? Whether attacks is better than gaining your own. But I think that what I found is that burning your own tactical objective cards, which eventually you do like 2 to 3 times, or I would say 1 to 2 times per game, means that getting additional command points from like passive CP regen actually isn't that useful. So having attacks is probably better, honestly. Cool. Yeah, I like it. I don't have much to say. I think the core of like triple Doomsday Arc, double Lichguard is just like so solid. I think that that's a good direction to go from for sure. All right, folks. Should we hop back into invitational stuff? We were just talking about Necrons. Should we continue to talk about Necrons? We have 2 Necron armies. So there's 4 Genestealer Cult, 3 Eldari, I believe. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3 Eldari, 2 Necrons, 2 Space Wolves, interestingly, and then 1 Custodes, 1 Knights, 1 Chaos Knights. So it's relatively diverse. I think obviously Eldar and Genestealer Cult being overrepresented is to be expected, but otherwise, I think it's a pretty good crew. Good distribution. So we can start at the top here, going down. Actually, let's save Lord Solar's to last because it is absolutely hilarious. So starting with Zach S, aka Prospero, but he went with Zach this time. Playing a relatively classic build. This one is actually sort of what you would expect from a couple weeks ago. I think pre the first Eldar nerf. No Astra Militarum? Yeah, I'm sorry to say. Astra Militarum are a little tough right now. Getting a points increase, I think, was a little bit too much for them. People were complaining about indirect fire, but I don't know if they were complaining about Astra Militarum indirect fire. I think they were, like, the biggest offenders were Desolators and Eldari, and Astra Militarum got caught in the crossfire, and I think it's very tough for them to compete currently. Just because, like, they built a faction entirely based around indirect fire and then upcharged all of it, which is, like, I don't know. It is what it is. So we have an Autarch Way Leaper, who's the Warlord, to grant you command points back. GSC Horde easier to play on TTS, yeah. You don't have to paint all those hundreds and hundreds of weird-looking models, so definitely, I think, the way to go. And I think a lot of people, like, you know, if they are in like, a high level of competition, they're going to go with whatever gives them the best opportunity. So I think Genestealer Cult is currently that, if you have the opportunity to practice with it. If you don't play Genestealer Cult very often, I do think it is possible to sort of choke with it. So, but all these players have been getting tons and tons of games in, so I think it's going to be some high-level GSC play. No Drukari either, chat. I'm sorry to say. Yeah. Just all the Eldar is Craft World and you know, with Yunari Splash, basically. So we have a Farseer with the Phoenix Gem. So one thing that often happens, and that I think that we are doing today, yeah, is that we're basically playing without anything that the Farseer can attach into. So this is the the classic one that grants Fortune. Just the regular old Farseer. Whose data sheet I think I have here. So he grants you -1 to be wounded. And because he doesn't have any unit to slot into, he's just taking the Phoenix Gem as an insurance policy. So if you run into an army that can kill him, you can just Phoenix Gem him back. So you're like really disincentivized from attacking him. And a lot of times I think people are just going to be basically shooting through the -1 to wound effect, which is, you know, at the end of the day is fine. We then have the Incarn, and if you haven't played against or seen the Incarn in this edition, it's pretty nuts because a lot of the restrictions that the Incarn used to have been removed. So it's a 2+ save, or half damage, so it's the Avatar defensive profile, so it's extremely difficult to kill. And then when a unit dies, once per phase, it can teleport. So previously, it could teleport infinite times. It could teleport to every single unit that died. Now, you have to be very careful when you teleport it, but the restriction that you can't heroically intervene or charge after you teleport has been removed. Now, heroic intervention is a lot tougher to do because you have to do it in response to a charging unit instead of just being able to do it naturally. But the fact that you can use your guns, which this list has a lot of, to shoot an enemy unit that's close to a bunch of other enemy units to death, and then port the Incarn to that and then charge off of that, means that this thing's threat range is like almost literally infinite. And its base is so big, and it has access to Strands of Fate dice, that it's probably impossible to escape from it charging you on that swing back. So you just have to be able to deal with it once it charges you, and you have to make sure that you don't shoot anything else elsewhere on the table before it gets to do its thing. But it is extremely, extremely difficult to deal with. That said, its damage output isn't quite as scary as it was. It's D6 + 1 damage, like strength 12, AP4. It's good. It's a good offensive profile, especially against low volume, like single target models, but it's not guaranteed to like blow whatever up. So if it hits you, it's just the equivalent of being shot by like a couple of las cannons, which is, you know, it sucks to get hit by, but it's not going to end the entire game. Nothing with the Lion either, chat. Sorry. Every single Space Marine is a Space Wolf, which is funny, and I think is like almost entirely it's like a T5S2 tradition at this point. Where this invitational has just a dramatic Space Wolf bent, and it's, I think, because there's a lot of top players online who love playing Space Wolves, and they end up getting invited to the invitational and playing Space Wolves because it's their baby, and like that's cool. And I think that Space Wolves are, you know, they have some interesting play. Their detachment is balls, but their faction-specific units are probably some of the best in the Space Marine Super Faction. So I think if you are looking for a Space Marine faction to slot into, Space Wolves have some really good sort of tech pieces. And we'll talk about them later because we have two very different Space Wolf lists to talk about, which is cool. So from there, we have a bunch of Hornets. These guys are, again, just sort of like a really efficient offensive profile. They're basically like a Warwalker, but with jet engines. So they're slower and easier to kill, but they're cheaper, and they have 2 Bright Lances attached to them. They also have like a drive-by shooting effect, like a bombing effect, which is pretty cool, but less useful. Mostly you're taking them because they're 80-point Bright Lance caddies. Although we're taking missile launchers today, which is interesting. I guess so that we get the blast profile to deal with other... like Genestealer Cult. They do fire, at that point, it's 2 D6 blast attacks, so against like a big unit of Neophytes, you're getting +8 on your shots. So you're averaging 15 shots at AP1. That's pretty good, but you lose a lot of efficiency on the missile launcher, the direct fire profile, not the blast profile. Then we have a Night Spinner for some indirect fire. 2 units of Shadow Specters. These, again, are super useful because they have a fire and fade ability they can shoot, and then they can fall back. They also have a blast weapon as well. So, again, if you're trying to bring these units that are good both in matchups where you're firing at a single target and matchups where you're blasting people, the Shadow Specters are another good style of unit to look into, because they also have basically the same profile as that missile launcher does, but then they also have a 3 damage single fire profile. So they're good into specifically like Helverins, less good into the big knights because they win them on 6s, but they're good into medium vehicles, and then they can also shoot a bunch of infantry, and then they can run away. So if you place ambush tokens near them, they can move, shoot, kill a unit, move to the ambush token and kill it. They're also good at scoring like maneuver secondaries. They're just like a very mid-range profile that gets extremely fast. Then we have 3 D-Cannon support weapon platforms. Not much to say about these guys. They're pretty classic. And then 2 units of Warp Spiders. Again, just ridiculously fast. And have a good torrent weapon, so they're okay in Overwatch 2. And then last but certainly not least, we do have the Wraith Cannon Wraith Knight. Not quite the same power level as he was when he was like 350 points, but still extremely strong. And we are playing the terrain that we're playing on. I should have a video about it coming out either today or tomorrow. The terrain that the Invitational will be playing on is based on the US Open layouts, but we have extended the height of a lot of the buildings. So towering's not quite as insane as it is on if you're just playing sort of rote GW terrain, but it still has way easier lines of sight than non-towering units. So these big towering vehicles and walkers are going to be super duper good. And we do have a couple other of those that show up in these Eldar lists. Moving on, Flashback here, also playing Eldar. Running some similar stuff. This time it's a Farseer Skyrunner with the Phoenix Gem, so he gets rerolls to hit instead of -1 to be wounded. But the same idea, he's going to be all by himself, so he can play more aggressively, and your opponent has a tough time killing him. We then have a Spirit Seer with Fate's Messenger, so that gives him an auto 6 on a hit, wound, or saving throw every turn. Plus, again, the Incarn as well. This one's running a lot more direct fire shooting, so fire prisms instead of those Hornets. Again, Shadow Specters, support weapon D-Cannon platforms, and Night Spinners. A Void Weaver support weapon platform. That's kind of cool. And Warwalkers, Warp Spiders, and then this big brick of Wraithguard. So I think I have a game on my replay channel playing Wraithguard. This should be their thing. And if you haven't played against these things before, they are absolutely nuts. They're so insane. They each have a one-shot. They're big Wraith Cannons, a one-shot, strength 14, AP 4, D6 damage, devastating wounds. Big blaster. We're taking the Farseer Skyrunner because we're going to be granting that reroll hits onto the unit. So they're normally 4+ ballistic skill. They get reroll hits from the Skyrunner, and attaching a Spirit Seer to the unit gives them +1 to hit. So they're rerolling. They're hitting on 3s, rerolling. They also get lethal hits, which is less useful, but it's still there. And then with the Spirit Seer, you can turn one of their wound rolls to an auto 6, so it automatically triggers devastating wounds. You're naturally going to get 1 or 2 additional devastating wounds, and because you have a Farseer Skyrunner, you can then Fate Dice a die roll to be a devastating wound as well, because he can automatically turn a Fate Dice into a 6. So you're guaranteed like 3 to 4 sets of devastating wounds every time you shoot, and you could potentially spike higher if you just roll a bunch of 6s naturally. So these guys are probably doing like between 10 and like 15 mortal wounds to you. On top of that, they're also just shooting you with a bunch of D6 damage, AP4 hits. And then they can do that on their shooting step in Overwatch, and then when they're attacked, they can do it again once per battle round. And importantly, that's anytime they're attacked, even if it's sort of out of sequence. So if you Overwatch them, they can shoot you. If you shoot them normally, they can shoot you. If you shoot them, or if you fight them in melee, they can shoot you because the ability gains them the pistol ability. The War Construct is their reactive fire. And if they engage you in melee and you attack them, which you have to do because you're forced to select targets with your melee weapons, then they also shoot you. So they functionally just double tap. They're basically just like, they get 2 shooting activations. They don't have to lose any models in order to trigger their their reactive fire, unlike basically every other reactive fire in the game, they just, after they're targeted, they just get to do it. So what you have to do to deal with them basically is kill almost the entire unit in a single shot. And because they're T7, 2+ save, -1 to be wounded, or I guess this list doesn't have the -1 to wound. But they're either way, they're a T7 with a 2+ save. It's unlikely that you have the beef to kill a lot of them in one hit. So their reactive fire is still going to be very, very strong. So yeah, this unit is absolutely nuts. They just sit in the middle of the table. Oftentimes you can kill them, but usually they'll kill way more than their points value before the end. Yeah, and the Spirits here reses them. Yeah, it's a good call out, chat. Yeah, the Spirits here brings 1 back per command phase, not their own command phase. In both players' command phase, they get 1 back. That could maybe be a typo, but I'm not 100% sure. Let's see if we can find the Spirit Seer's profile here. Oh, my cat's in my way. Inky. Oh, say hello to chat. Hi, chat. She says. No? There he is. Yeah, correct. They also they don't have to shoot back at whatever attacks them. They can select any target. They just shoot as if it were your shooting phase. They make a normal shooting activation essentially. Importantly, it's not in their own shooting phase. So if they don't trigger it on a reverse reactive fire, I guess they don't get their detachment ability, so they don't get their floating reroll, but they can still use like Strands of Fate dice and stuff. Yeah. Find it difficult to get them in line of sight of a target. That's interesting. Yeah, usually, I think you just usually play them very aggressively. Oftentimes what happens is that you'll move up the table with them, and then you'll Phantasm in your opponent's turn, because as long as you have control over what attacks them, right? Because you can just elect to put them in line of sight of specific enemy units. And that means that you can kind of couch what is able to shoot them, and you can make it so that whatever shoots them doesn't kill too many of them, and then they get to shoot back. What they want to do is be shot at, lose 1 to 2 models, shoot back and kill something important, and then respawn those models over the next turn. On the German cards, it explicitly says your command phase. Oh, for the Spirits here? Wild. That's wild. Good old German. German, I remember, also used to have different rules for movement in 9th edition. If I remember correctly, there was a whole discussion because I think the German rulebook specifically said that only your base counted when like moving around things, which is like a way better way for that rule to work. Like it's weird that you have to like worry about where your staff is or whatever if you're moving around buildings and stuff. And I remember a discussion that the German rulebook specifically did not have that verbiage, which is very funny. Good old German being like a much more precise language than English that actually cares about proofreading. All right, moving on. So we do have one more Eldar list to talk about, and it is a spicy one. This is going to be the first list that we have on the stream. Oop, I didn't click on it. And it is Lord Solar's list. So this one's very simple. It's we've got the Farseer, the foot Farseer with the Phoenix Gem. We're seeing a little bit of a pattern. An Autarch Way Leaper as the Warlord to get command points, which is important because we're going to be burning a ton of command points. Death Jester with Fate's Messenger. So he has devastating wounds on his gun. So the Fate's Messenger allows him to automatically trigger devastating wounds. So he can just blast people for mortals basically all day. A Spirit Seer and 10 Wraithguard. So again, basically the same unit. 2 units of 5 Shadow Spectre, or 3 units of 5 Shadow Spectres, excuse me. One of them with a 6 model, because you can take a DX Arc for 20. And then, last but certainly not least here, chat. Look at this little friendo. One Revenant Titan. Look at that. Wraithguard can charge unit when it swings on you. You can shoot them. Yeah, that is how that works. Yeah, even if you're engaged in melee, you're forced to attack, and so you have to target them with an attack and they can shoot. Why that ability allows them to shoot in melee is a mystery to me. It's absolutely nuts. Yeah, so let's talk about the Revenant Titan for a little while here, chat. because this thing is pretty silly. So we're playing it with Sonic Lances. So this is it gets 2 of these things because there's 1 in each arm. This thing does cost 1,100 points. So we are putting a ton of, over half of the army into this. It gets D6 plus 6 shots per lance. So we're firing 12 plus 2d6. So an average of 19 shots with this thing. It's a torrent weapon, so it automatically hits. Importantly, it doesn't ignore cover, which is interesting. But it is assault, so we can advance to try to maybe peek around cover. And it is AP 3/2 damage. It's also anti-monster vehicle 4+. So it's good into almost literally every profile. It's high strength, high AP, mid damage for shooting at infantry. And its strength is too low to hit vehicles and monsters effectively, but it has anti-monster and vehicle. The one downside is that it's only an 18-inch range, but the Revenant Titan moves 6 inches and can advance and shoot with this guy. So, and when he advances, he goes 24. Now, it is sort of new fly rules, so he has to go up and down around terrain. So, because he's physically large unit, you will have to kind of meander around terrain pretty hard in order to get shots with this thing. But once you get a bead on somebody, it's a ton of damage. It also has another 2d6, basically a similar profile, but a 2d6 shot on its missile launcher. It's like shoulder-mounted missile launcher as well. So it's firing an immense amount of shooting. It has this rule of Towering Wraith construct, so it doubles the cost of stratagems you use on it, which is good. Because you want to be like overwatching with it, because it does have this huge torrent profile. So what it wants to do is just sort of get up into an annoying position. It's toughness 13 with a 2+ save and 30 wounds. So it's unlikely to be killed, especially because the Farseer can target it with his buffs. So he can put Fortune on it to be -1 to be wounded. Fortunately, he can also do that to the Wraithguard unit, but he can't do it to... We don't have Fortune, or Guide, excuse me, for the Wraithguard. So they don't have access to their rerolls. But this guy is incredibly difficult to kill, so you can play very aggressively with it. And then you can burn basically all your CP every turn to effectively shoot twice, because you're going to Overwatch with it. It costs you 2 CP, you get 3 per turn, and if you get vected with it, it's going to be expensive, which I think if your opponent has access to that ability, they're just going to windmill slam it on this guy. But yeah, it's a pretty nuts profile, chat. There's very little in the game that like sort of reasonably threatens it, especially since a lot of stuff will just get wiped out by Overwatch shots from it. It does basically cost all of your command points to do it, so there's very little phantasming or other chicanery going on. But I don't really know what realistically kills it, unless you have good anti-vehicle profiles, like specifically have the anti-vehicle ability on a lot of stuff, so you can get around the high toughness and wound, the -1 to wound. Or you just kill the Farseer, I guess. He doesn't have any defensive tech. So if you have indirect fire, it's all just all going into him and forcing the Phoenix Gem to respawn him. But yeah, absolutely wild list. It seems pretty good, especially being able to like sort of Overwatch over things thanks to towering. It's kind of difficult to deal with. But it is going to be, maneuvering it around the table is going to be really, really, really awkward. Yeah, I think a lot of people dropped Guardian Defenders, chat, because of the Fate Dice changes. Having tons of Fate Dice doesn't really do much for you, because you are already... You can only use so many over the course of the game, and the Farseer is making most of the Fate Dice that you're using into 6s anyway, so getting extra Fate Dice doesn't really matter so much. But they're okay. Off-topic question. Do I think Phantasm would be a balanced strat for 2 command points? I definitely think that helps. I do think that at the very least that should change it for sure. I mean, Eldar are so efficient with their command points anyway, because they have the Outrage Way Leaper, that it doesn't hit them quite as hard as it could, but it does make their game plan much worse. So I do think so. I also think the other thing you could do is you could make it a triggered ability. Because right now you can do it like any time after your opponent has moved, so you get to see their movement, and you can do it regardless of the proximity to enemies. I think it should be like you could use it if you're within 9 inches of someone. So if your opponent doesn't want to give you the opportunity to Phantasm, it doesn't just act as a threat range increaser. Either one of those is probably fine. It does definitely need to tap for sure to reduce its power level. 50 fate dice over the course of a game. An unnecessary number. That's too many. All right. Is that assuming that, like, the dude with the Weeping Stones or whatever can, the guy who recycles fate dice when he kills people, like, kills somebody every turn? That's probably unlikely to happen. Although it's not inconceivable, for sure. All right. Let's move on. So we've talked about the two big ones. Next up, we have Necrons. I think we'll hop into Necrons next. And then we'll do all the little individual factions that are on the bottom here. So first off, we have Doots. Fan favorite, Mr. Doots. Playing some Necrons. He's running 2 Hexmark Destroyers. A lot of times, we've talked about all these, a lot of these units already, thanks to Kellen's list submission there. But yeah, double Hexmark Destroyers. Again, they deep strike in their lone operatives, which is already a good combination of effects that you always want to have in your lists, basically regardless. So pretty good. Then they have reactive overwatches as well. They can overwatch for free an additional time. So unlike a lot of the other free stratagem effects, we have ruled that if your free stratagem effect allows you to use it on Overwatch, your Overwatch can supersede the normal once per turn restrictions. So the Hexmark Destroyers can Overwatch multiple times potentially. We have a Locust Lord with a Resurrection Orb. He's going to go into a big unit of Locust Destroyers. Orican the Diviner. This dude's profile is absolutely nuts, by the way. If we can take a quick look at Orican here. I think I have to dig up his data sheet. He is both an incredibly good support unit. For some reason that spawned in weird. I don't know what happened there, chat. Terrible. He's both incredibly strong as an attachment unit because he grants the entire unit a 4+ invulnerable save. So he's giving you an Arcane Shield effect, which is good for big bricks of warriors or immortals. And then on top of that, he has his once per game effect where he can triple his attacks and strength characteristics. So he goes to 6 attacks at strength 12. He has devastating wounds on his staff, and he automatically critical wounds on all of his wound rolls. So he wounds most of the game on 3s or 4s, probably at strength 12, and then automatically turns those into D3 mortals. So he probably plows you for like 6 to 9 mortal wounds on the turn that he uses his stars are right. So engaging into his unit isn't even a great idea because he could just plow you for a ton of mortal wounds, which is super good for that dude. No Votan list, chat. I'm sorry to say, no Votan were submitted this time around. I think not super surprising. We then have a Technomancer with Sovereign Coronal. He's a little bit cheaper than the Hexmark Destroyer, and you're not really, because of the position where he's usually kind of in the back of the brick. He's not playing aggressively, so getting his losing out on his guns isn't that big of a deal. So just taking it on a Technomancer is fine. And then a Hypermaterial Ablator Overlord. The Transcended Catan with Sempiternal Weave is also an important pick. This guy's another useful unit. He's kind of like the Incarn, just in the usefulness you get out of him. So one of the benefits of the Incarn is that if you have a unit of like Rangers or a Hornet or something on an objective and your opponent destroys it, the Incarn can teleport to the objective to ensure that you don't lose control of it. And even more so than its melee profile, that's one of the big benefits of that unit. And the Transcendent Catan's similar. Obviously, it's quite exactly the same because it doesn't, it doesn't like actually kill you once it teleports in. But because it has that transdimensional displacement, every time it advances, it can teleport itself. So it just deep strikes constantly over the course of the game. So if you ever draw tactical objectives that you really need to like push to the other side of the table to complete, the Transcendent Catan can pick up and then just drop over there to do it. It has assault on its ranged weapons, so it can declare an advance, teleport, and then grant the still complete actions with that. And it's functionally impossible to kill. It has a 4+ invulnerable save to start with. Also 4+ armor, so if you're AP 0 and it's in cover, then it'll get a 3+, which is kind of nice. It halves incoming damage, and then also, because you can assign the Sempiternal Weave to it, it gets a 4+ Feel No Pain. So it's basically between ignoring half of your attacks thanks to the invulnerable save, ignoring half your damage thanks to the Necrodermis, and ignoring half of the final damage thanks to the Sempiternal Weave. It's basically 8thing your damage. Like 1 out of every 8 potential damage that gets through the wound phase will actually impact the Catan. So you have to do, what is that, 96 potential wounds to it to actually kill it, which is a lot. Most armies can't do that. Now, it is extremely expensive. It's almost 300 points. And it doesn't do that much damage. Like, all of its guns, like, they're fine. They're strength 6, or they're strength 8 and 9, and, like, middling AP, sort of okay damage. But for 300 points, it's not going to do 300 points worth of work. But what it is going to do is annoy your opponent. It's going to tie stuff up, and it's going to complete your tactical objectives really easily. So, yeah, pretty good profile there for that guy. Absolutely silly unit. Big unit of 20 Necron Warriors, so that's where kind of the Diviner's going, to give them the invulnerable save. A Ghost Arc, 1 Reanimator, a unit of Scarab Swarms, just to do actions. 1 unit of Cryptothralls, again, to go into that big Necron Warrior brick. 2 Doomsday Arcs, the big unit of 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers for the Locust Lord to go into. Gives them that 5+ critical hits effect. And these guys have the Amnitic Exterminators, so the blast weapons, so they can try to clear hordes with that unit, and then 2 individual Locust Destroyers as well. Good stuff. Hurricane hurts so much. Yeah, he's so good, for sure. A lucky Wraith Knight can one-shot him? Maybe. Maybe. All right, moving on. We do have one more Necron. Raze667, who we're going to be watching play on Wednesday night. So tomorrow night, we have that game scheduled. It should be a good one. Running a lot faster and lighter of a build. So this one, running 1 big Lichguard brick, a unit of 6 Tomb Blades, 2 units of 6 Tomb Blades, excuse me, with Particle Beamers, 2 units of 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers, the Sempiternal Catan, Orican the Diviner. I wonder where he's going. Oh, probably into these Immortal units. An Overlord with a Hypermaterial Ablator, 2 units of 10 Immortals, a Reanimator, a Locust Lord with the Veil of Darkness, another Scarab Swarm, and a unit of 6 Locust Destroyers. So we can put the Locust Lord into the Locust Destroyers. They can trigger lethal hits on a 5+. So it makes them pretty solid at shooting basically whatever profile you want. You can use the Veil of Darkness to teleport them around to try either get them out of danger or project them up the table. You can also just use that to like complete secondaries too. Just having a character that can teleport himself once per game is pretty useful. So this one is a lot different of a build. We're running the big Lichguard brick, and a lot of the characters can either swap between the Immortals or the Lichguard depending on what we want to do with them. But it means that the army's a lot more difficult to get your teeth into, right? So, like, whereas a lot of these Necron builds are running 2 to 3 big bricks of infantry plus 2 to 3 big tanks, this one's running basically all units of, like, 3 to 6 models. So it's harder for, like, you know, if we're talking about that big Revenant Titan or something, it's harder for it to pick one big thing to focus on and just try to beam as much damage into as possible, because these smaller units are going to be more difficult to take down on the whole. And I think, especially with a lot of the game being centered around these big, like, haymakers right now, where you have this, like, neophyte brick that you pump, like, 4 CP worth of stratagems into and a ton of special effects and character buffs, and they just, like, shoot something off the table, or you have these big Wraithguard bricks, or you have, you know, any of these big, huge brick units. I wonder if we're going to be seeing a push towards more 3-man units that will die to those, but they don't die in such a volume that you trade down into them. If a big, you know, unit of dudes deep strikes in and flamethrowers 3 Locust Destroyers away, you're going to feel bad about that, and then you're going to kill that unit and then feel much better. So, it's cool to see 2 very different varieties of Necrons. I think it kind of shows a little bit of the flexibility of Necrons. Like, they both have the bricks in them, but one of them's Warriors, one of them's Lichguard, and one of them's bringing Locusts versus Doomsday Arcs, and I think that's really cool. Warscythe Lichguard. I'm worried about Warscythe Lichguard just in terms of their survivability, because if they eat one hit really hard and just get, like, blasted off the table, I'm a little bit worried that they they don't have the beef to continue to reanimate like they would normally want to, but they hit so freaking hard once they get there that it might be fine. I'm interested to see where that sort of ends up. And again, that's another thing where if you are playing this big like haymaker, these two Death Star units trying to fight each other, having a unit that hits harder is much better. But if it becomes more difficult to engage with those things, then you want the tankier unit almost every time. If you're going to kill whatever you charge anyway, why do we need War Science to do it? Yeah, I guess, yeah, Oracan giving them the invulnerable save. That is good. And I guess you can still stack it with the Hyper Material Blader, right? Because you can attach him and an Overlord. That's some solid. Oh my god, my cat's attacking me. Inky, come say hi to chat. Chat wants to see you. You don't want to do it? Alright. She's a little shy. Who should we dive into next, chat? We have 2 Space Wolves, 1 Tyranids, 1 Thousand Suns, 1 Knights, 1 Chaos Knights, 1 Custodes. So a lot of individual factions around at the edge here. I guess we should talk about the next faction that has multiple entries, and that's Space Wolves, which is super sick, by the way. I love that. Lichguard have the -1 to wound, yeah. That is real good. There's a reason that Lichguard are super sweet. All right. So we are looking at Agent X over here, playing some Space Wolves. Again, the Space Wolf, like Sons of Rust detachment is pretty poopy. So all these Space Wolf lists are going to be in Gladius Task Force, which I do think is good and actually synergizes really well with Space Wolves in general. This one's running the Calidus Assassin, so we have access to a Vect, and interestingly, we're actually going to get access to multiple Vects because we are also bringing Bjorn the Fell-Handed. So the Calidus Assassin is a lone operative character. Obviously, you can deep strike around the table and do your secondaries, and then once per game. It gets a super Vect. Its CP tax is actually way stronger than most of them because the Calidus Assassin CP tax is it continues to increase the more you use the stratagem. Most CP tax abilities, and I think this is the case for the Calidus Assassin and for Kairos Fateweaver, I think are the two that do this. Most CP abilities say that for the rest of the battle, when you use the stratagem, you pay 1 extra CP to use it. The Calidus and Kairos Fateweaver say that each time you use the stratagem, increase the cost of that stratagem by 1. So if you vect a 1 CP stratagem, the next time they use it, it's 2. The time after that, it's 3. Then the time after that, it's 4, and it continues to compound. I guess it doesn't compound; it's a linear scale as you continue to use it. It just gets more and more expensive. But probably 1 or 2 uses in, you can't use it anymore. You're out of CP to do it. Bjorn also has a CP tax as well, so you can, there's one stratagem you just never want your opponent to use, you can double tap it for +2 command points if you ever increase it, or you can hit 2 separate stratagems. He is expensive for just a Dreadnought with a Hellfrost Cannon, but that is getting an access to a second CP tax is huge. Very few factions can do that. In fact, I think this might be the only one. Don't quote me on that, but I think it might be. Moving on, we have 2 units of 5 infiltrators. Again, the infiltrators are useful for being able to screen out like a lot of these Genestealer cult units that are relying on deep strike and prevent things from jumping into your backline to score tactical objectives. 2 units of scout snipers. These have a built-in lone operative effect, so they can't be shot outside 12, so that makes them excellent backline objective holders, and they have a 2 damage gun, which is also good. 3 units of Inceptors. So this section right here is all of the sort of utility units that Space Wolves have access to, which is super useful. Surprised you could spend it on command reroll. I know, that's pretty wild, right? That's a big difference from how that effect worked in 9th edition. Don't think anyone is ruling the Calidus effect that way. To my knowledge, I haven't seen anyone rule against them. Against it that way. But that is just literally what it says on the card. I don't know if you can just ruling directly against rules as written. That is how it works, though. So 2 Bolter Inceptor squads, which I think are just higher attack volume, but lose out on the strength AP and damage that the plasma gets, and then the plasma shots. But these guys are twin linked, so they don't need rerolls so much by themselves. They can deep strike within 3 inches of people, so they're excellent at completing objectives, and they're not too expensive. 115 is a little pricey, but not too much. They are low objective control value, so they're only OC 1, but they can usually shoot off another unit from whatever objective they jump in onto. Knights aren't really a fan of you taking ion shields away. Get wrecked. Get wrecked, Knights. Yeah, I guess that is pretty impactful for hitting like stuff with Gladiator Lancers and things. From there, we have 3 units of 5 Fenrisian Wolves, so they're just 30-point, relatively fast units. The interesting interaction between any of this stuff, but notably the Fenrisian Wolves and Gladius Task Force, is that the Gladius Task Force abilities, the Doctrine abilities that you can unlock with that detachment, have a very specific wording that makes them very powerful when used with units that are that don't have ranged weapons. The Devastator Doctrine specifically gives you the ability to advance and shoot, but it doesn't give your guns assault. And the reason that's important is that it allows units without guns to advance and perform actions. So it's exactly the same effect as assault, where after you advance, you can still be selected to perform your ranged attacks, but it doesn't require that you have a ranged weapon. So units like the Fenrisian Wolves, you can either use adaptive strategy or you can just choose Devastator Doctrine, and they can advance into the middle of the table and perform actions to complete secondary missions, which is super cool. Just a super useful 30-point unit. I don't know. They're like the new Cyber Wolves, basically. They're twice as expensive, but you get 5 times as many, so what's not to love? We then have an Invictor Tactical Warsuit with an Incendium Cannon. This one is this one threw me for a loop, to be honest. The Invictor Warsuit is an interesting. Let's bring up his data sheet. Is an interesting include. He's a little bit squishy. He does scout move. He does scout move, which is good, and has a bunch of twin-linked weapons. But that means mostly or largely he can shoot at things that aren't necessarily selected as your Oath of Moment target, but doesn't have a huge attack volume, right? It's just 3 shots from the Stubbers, 3 shots from the Heavy Bolter, a couple Fragstorm shots, and then whatever your Incendium Cannon is shooting. But he does give you an auto-hitting reactive fire, because he has that reactive fire when you shoot at a Phobos unit, which can include himself, I believe, right? Yeah, a friendly Phobos unit within 6. So he basically, if you're trying to kill him with guns, gets 2 shots per turn. And if you're not trying to kill him with guns, he can overwatch you with an auto-hitting D6 plus 3 shot flamer. So it's, I don't know, it's interesting, I guess. 2 shots with the Incendium Cannon's pretty good, but he is kind of expensive. But it is cool to see him in there. I do like that guy. The Calidus doesn't specify each time in the app. I can only yeah, I can only use the go by the wording on the data sheet here. Yeah, so it's oh, maybe it was changed. Is this updated, chat? Let me look here. Or maybe I'm just second guessing myself. Sorry, chat. I'm trying to find my... I think I have the saved version from when it was released. But I might have gotten rid of it. Maybe it did get reworded. Maybe that whole discussion was incorrect. Oh, no, I have the old one. Just kidding. All right. Well, I think it might have been altered. I'm not sure. All right. Well, I'll call it moot. I'm not sure what I'm thinking about there. Oh, it is Phobos infantry for the Invictor. Yeah, that's fair. You can't shoot it. You can't shoot it after they target yourself. Yeah, so maybe I'm wrong about the Calidus Assassin chat. I'll cop that one. That's what I get for not looking at the datasheet while I'm talking about it. Is that still the case for Kairos then? I think it might be because it says the cost to use it again is increased by 1, so that would continue to compound. I think that's the reason. The problem is that it has slightly different wording than the other lone operative, or the other CP tax effects.
Could you possibly review my list during stream? I'll link it in Discord. It's 6-0 and I'm going up against GSC this weekend.
Ooh.
If new Pyrovore is 45 points or less, I might ditch the Tyrant GRD for them.
New Pyrovore. Are they increasing the Pyrovore's points cost? Or you just mean like the resculpted one might have a different thing? Yeah. Yeah, I'll take a look at your list after we finish talking about this Space Wolves here. Okay, so all right, I've discovered the heart of my confusion here, chat. The Kairos Fateweaver specifies each time. So Kairos Fateweaver stacks, and the Calidus Assassin has a slightly different wording. And I believe that the effect of Kairos' CP tax and the Calidus Assassin is the same, because the Calidus continues because the Calidus specifies that the cost of your stratagem is increased every time you use it again, right? So like the first time they use the stratagem, where did my pictures go? Oh no, what happened there? The first time you use your stratagem, the cost is increased by 1. Then to use it again, it's increased by another 1. Right? Is the way I worded that? Kairos for sure increases the cost every time because he increases the cost each time your opponent uses the stratagem. I think the Calidus Assassin is much more up in the air, by the way, chat. I wish that they had used templated wording, but it is GW that we're talking about. Hey, just you just type it, you just PM it to me. It might just be Kairos. Now that we're discussing it, I am kind of second-guessing myself here, but I do think that the Calidus Assassin, the intent is that the Calidus Assassin also does it. Because she doesn't increase the cost to use the stratagem. She doesn't just increase the cost of the stratagem. She uses the cost to use the stratagem an additional time, which, because it lasts until the end of the round, would continue to stack, to my knowledge. Yeah, it's definitely ambiguous, for sure. I agree with that, chat. So I could definitely see that it would roll it the other way. I think the intention is that it works like Kairos' does, but it's kind of weird and badly worded. Definitely. Kairos is sweet, though. Definitely. I love that guy. Love a good Kairos. All right, closing this list out, though, by the way, chat, we have 2 Gladiator Lancers, as well as 2 Whirlwinds, and an Ironclad Dreadnought. It's been a while since we've seen the Ironclad Dreadnought on the field as well. Let's take a look at this guy. Gotta grab his profile real quick. Here he is. What a cutie pie this dude is. Look at this little friend. So we're running a seismic cannon and a hurricane bolter. So a lot of infantry sweeping. It's rapid fire 6, so it can shoot up to 12 times, reeling its wound rolls, which is pretty solid. Plus, it has an assault launcher, so it can drop grenades on people, and a seismic hammer. So it's swinging for 3 attacks with strength 14, AP 3, D6 plus 2 damage. So a little bit of a kind of a late game, armor cracker there. It's good in a variety of situations. They're super hard to kill for their points value. T10, a 2+ save is pretty solid. And I think one thing that you can do with these guys, and in any of these slow, sort of close combat-oriented vehicles, is that you can rapid ingress them in off the table edge to get them closer to your opponent. And at that point, if they rapid ingress into a position where only 1 or 2 things can shoot them, it probably doesn't kill them, and they get to move up and then get a charge with their big hammer later on in the turn, or the subsequent turn, which, again, just sort of forces your opponent to screen really heavily as well. Which is also just useful. That one is, it's very spicy. This is an extremely spicy list, by the way, chat. Orcs would destroy it? Yeah, I mean, if you're anti-vehicle. Anti-vehicle devastating wound, yeah, sure. You're like, well, I don't care about your toughness or save characteristics. Of course you would destroy it. But then again, he's only 150 points, so it's not, if he goes down, it's not the end of the world. The other Space Wolf that we have here is Anamander. So our Season 2 champion, who also played Space Wolves back in the day to get to that point, rocking another really spicy list. It starts pretty strong. We have a Primaris Librarian with Bolter Discipline. This is one of the few characters that can attach to Desolator squads, so he's going to go into a Desolator squad to give them the 5+ critical hits for sustained during Devastator Doctrine. We then have 2 Wolfguard battle leaders on Thunderwolves and 2 Wolf Lords on Thunderwolves. One of them has the Honor Vehement, so he gets the extra strength and extra attack, doubling the effect if you're in Assault Doctrine. We then have the Big Desolation Squad. I think like 90% of Space Marine lists are going to have this unit in it. It's alongside the character with Bolter Discipline to attach in. It's just so efficient. You basically can't get away from it. It's 400-ish points, and it's going to kill more than 400-ish points every game, and there's basically nothing your opponent can do to mitigate it unless they also have ridiculous anti-artillery shooting. And most of the characters that join into Desolation Squads, either Primaris Apothecaries or Librarians, can protect them. The Librarian gives them a 4+ invulnerable save, and the Apothecary can regenerate them. We then have 2 Gladiator Lancers, 2 Inceptor squads, one with Assault Bolters, one with Plasma Exterminators. It's interesting that the Plasma Gun seemed so much better looking at this unit when it was released. But it seems like things have come much more into the center with a higher volume of the Assault Bolters is useful. Because they're a lot of times going to be shooting at other sort of lightly armored infantry units. So you don't necessarily need like the big 3 damage, like a high AP gunshot. Surprised there's no Thunderfire cannons? Yeah, they don't hit very hard. They're good into like Adeptus Custodes, but if you have a limited number of Adeptus Custodes, then it's whatever. A lot of those suppression effects only affect infantry, which a lot of times doesn't really matter so much. I mean, it's okay like against Genestealer Cult, but you can't slow them down if they're deep striking. So again, it doesn't really matter. We then have an Infiltrator squad. And 2 Scout Bike squads, as well as the Spice right here. 2 units of Thunderwolf Cavalry. So These guys can attach both the Wolfguard Battle Leader and the Wolf Lord, so we could go to units of 8 Thunderwolf Cavalry apiece. They just have their Strength 5 heirloom weapons, their new annoying, kind of crappy power weapon profile. But they then have 2 characters with Thunderhammers in the unit. And then because we're in Gladius Task Force, for 1 command point, we can flip them into Assault Doctrine, give them Advance and Charge, so they can actually get around intervening terrain relatively efficiently, and then also use Honor of the Chapter to give them +1 AP, so their heirloom weapons go to AP 3, I believe, and +1 to wound. So for their points value, they're relatively high, wound count, and they're relatively fast if you're advancing and charging and doing all that stuff. And they hit like a Mac truck once they get into melee, especially if they're targeting their it's a moment target, because they're wounding most of the game on 4s or 5s, rerolling wounds. They'll just crush it. And they have enough attack volume between the Thunderwolf itself attacking and the heirloom weapon that they can clear infantry too. The plasma needs Oath just to reroll hits. Guess I could see that. They both have Twin Linked though, right? So they're both rerolling wounds all the time anyway. Swabilius, congrats on the 51k subs. Thank you so much. Yeah, we hit 50k a week or 2 ago. And that was pretty exciting. I didn't do any big brouhaha for it because we did a huge giveaway for 40,000 subscribers. But yeah, it's been great. I appreciate the support from everybody. Thanks for the congratulations. Yeah, so this list is spicy as hell. I think I like the inclusion of especially the Scout Bikers, whose data sheet I thought I had up. Oh, hi, Cat. You're in my way. I need to see that screen. Oh, there you are. You want to say hello to chat? Say hello to chat. You're gonna still be shy? Hello. In German, the Caladius Assassin can only use its Vex once per game. Yeah. All Vex are once per game. Oh, sustained to mitigate the hit roll. Yeah, sustained is roughly equivalent of +1 to +2 to hit, right? So they're basically, they should hit with theoretically with all of their shots. Yeah, we're talking some Scout Bikers today, chat. And I apologize here. I thought I had grabbed their data sheet, but I guess I didn't. Mistakes were made. The downside of Space Marines having 1 trillion data sheets. All right, here we go. We got it. So importantly for them, they have Assault on their shotgun. So they can strategic reserve into your opponent's deployment zone. So they can complete really aggressive investigate signals really early if your opponent doesn't screen them effectively, which can be a downside, where if you get behind enemy lines or investigate on round 1 or 2, you can, it's oftentimes a blank draw for you. But the Scout Bikes help out with that. Plus they have an Assault shotgun, so they can they scout, move, plus can advance and perform actions. So they're super good at utility, and they're also good at clearing infantry because they have the twin bolt guns. So they have 2 bolt gun shots, and all of them have a shotgun as well. So they're firing at base 4 shots per model. And in the past, you used to also take storm bolters on the Sergeant as well, but it looks like we're just rocking Power Fists on those guys. Oh, and everyone's taking grenade launchers. Yeah, so they're shooting 2 shotgun shots plus a blast grenade launcher shot. So they're pretty good at clearing out either medium infantry with the crack grenade or even blasting lighter units. Yeah, it might be a language thing for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if German has a cleaner wording than the English one. The weird part is that the English one says that it comes into effect when your opponent uses the stratagem again, and because it affects them for the whole game, it would apply one more time every time they use the stratagem again. Sort of the each time is implied, I guess. The real question is why it has a different wording than the regular Vect, which would imply that it's supposed to be it's supposed to be functionally different, whereas every other CP tax in the game has the same wording than Kairos and the Calidus. If one model in the unit has a gun with assault, can the unit advance in action? Yes. As long as you have at least one assault weapon in the unit, the entire unit can advance. And they can't shoot unless the weapon that they have is assault, but because in order for the model with the assault weapon to be able to shoot, the unit has to be selected. The entire unit gets eligible to be selected if you have at least one assault weapon, which is useful. That's why assault weapons are so valuable right now. All right, moving on. We've got some Thousand Suns to talk about. A man after my own heart right here, Devin, playing some Thousand Suns. So he's got Ahriman on a disc. Interesting. I actually put Ahriman on his disc in my own army recently because a lot of people were worried about like anti-fly effects impacting him, but everything in Thousand Suns is so low toughness, it actually doesn't matter at all. Unless they have devastating wounds, and even then, it's not that big of a deal. So for 5 extra points, you get an extra wound, and you get 4 extra inches of movement on Ahriman himself. And that extra wound comes in clutch a lot of times, because he's oftentimes the last model remaining in the unit. An Infernal Master with Arcane Vortex. This guy is super nuts. He can overcharge his Flamer for a 2d6 shots, and it's Strength 7, AP 2, 2 damage. And because it's Psychic, can get devastating wounds from the Detachment ability. Magnus the Red, the great man himself. Will I commentary the WTC like I did LVO? I guess maybe I will, because it's actually being streamed this time. That last year it did not have English coverage, so it was harder to like watch party it. But we might watch party it. I'll say tentatively yes. Tentatively yes. We'll watch the WTC over on Twitch for sure. Running 2 blades with 2 particle beamers, 1 Tesla, so you can advance and do actions. There you go. Perfect. Scout bike's not as interesting as plane scouts. Yeah, you're there for the speed, right? You want to have the on-table speed rather than the flexibility, I think, is what we're taking them for. Also, they're like 20. I guess they're more expensive, but like you get huge distance with them if you need it. A big benefit, I think, right now, too, is like these fast units. Is a lot of the units that we're talking about currently are infantry rather than vehicles, and so they can't fire when they're engaged. So having these little units that can run around a corner or something and then like engage infantry shooters before they get in is a pretty big deal. I wonder how often that comes up, especially against like Genestealer Cult and stuff, where you can push really up far forward and then engage their guns and force them to deep strike away, basically. Yeah, it is nice that they got War Games Live over there. It'll be cool for him to start doing some European events. Looks like I think he was also in talks to do the London GT too, which should be cool. So, I mean, best of luck to him. I don't. The logistical nightmare of taking that rig across the ocean sounds so terrifying to me. I don't know if I'd be able to do it, but it's more power to him. So moving on here, we also have a basic sorcerer with Athenian Scrolls, so he generates an additional Cabal point every turn, and then a Terminator sorcerer with Umbrellific Crystal, so he can deep strike again, pick up and deep strike. We then have a big Warp Flamer brick. Oftentimes you'll see Ahriman in that unit to give +1 to wound to the whole brick, and then they reserve onto the table and just kill whatever they shoot at. We then also have an Infernal Bolt Gun, a 10-man Infernal Bolt Gun squad, and this is mostly to use the combination of using stratagems to count their bolt guns as psychic weapons, and then potentially granting them rerolls, although they have rerolls baked in. So you can use it's called Echoes from the Warp, the Cabal ritual, to use a stratagem twice. You can give Psychic both to the Rubric Marine squad and to the Terminator squad, and you can get both of them rerolls to wound, which is pretty good. We then have another unit of 5 rubrics with just 5 duders to go do actions and stuff. 10 Scarabocult Terminators. These guys do massive damage if you can give them the full rerolls to hit and wound with their bolters. On top of that, you can give them, if they're standing next to Magnus, they'll get +1 to hit and wound. And even if they're not shooting at something with the psychic rerolls, they get reroll 1s, or anything gets reroll 1s from the Terminator Sorcerer. He can target one thing and you reroll 1s against it. 2 Rhinos to put the big bricks inside so they don't get blown up. A unit of Zangor Enlightened for some utility, and the Changeling, again, another utility guy. He's a lone operative. He's difficult to shoot at. He can make you -1 to hit, and because he's a demon, he deep strikes innately. So you can just put him in deep strike, send him over to do investigate signals or something if you need to. And there you are. Had a Phobos Librarian instead of the Scout Bikes. Yeah, I like the, especially Jan, after you mentioned that in the in the chat, the technology of the Phobos Librarian to slot into the infiltrator squads and make unshootable deep strike, anti-deep strike denial is like seems super duper solid. So hopefully you can still make it out of the GSE matchup. That one might be rough, but I'm pulling for you, buddy. Thoughts on the Exalted Sork on disc with Umbler Crystal? You have the Terminator Sork Arcane Vortex? No, I would never take Arcane Vortex off the Infernal Master, I think. The Terminator Sorcerer's gun's not that great. It's fine, but it's not amazing. It'll plink a couple damage off a vehicle or something, but the Arcane Vortex guy like wins games but with his flamethrower all by itself. I don't hate the Disc Sorcerer with Arcane Vortex, but honestly, most of the time I found that he's fast enough that he can get where he needs to. The Disc Sorcerer, I'm actually not even that sold on the Disc Sorcerer. I'm running one in my army, but I might drop him. I guess this one doesn't have one. But because the things that you want to use him on are like typically in the middle, like a unit of it's almost exclusively for like Custodes or like Black Templars or something, where your opponent has these big bricks that are pushing on you, and he wants to get up and delay that brick from doing anything for a turn, and you don't need to be super fast or teleport in order to do that. And he's already moved 10, so he'll get there anyway, and he can advance and do his thing. So and you can double move him. Like, you know, it's never really felt necessary that he gets the crystal. But the ability to pull the Terminators to wherever you need them to be is super important. Like, they can deep strike, double move, then the next turn pull off, deep strike somewhere else, double move. And the flexibility is really important. Whereas if that unit gets stuck, and I've experienced this in my own games, I have VODs on the replay channel, where if that unit gets stuck and gets pinned down and killed, it's so expensive. It's like 550 points plus all the stratagems you're pumping into it. Or 535 points, I guess. Then the game's just over. Basically, you've died. Is there a formula for making a balanced army list? It depends on what you mean by balanced. Do you mean balanced like it's not too powerful but it doesn't die, or balanced like it's good against all comers? Because if it's all comers you're looking for, let me tell you about my friend the Pentagon of Power. All right, moving on. We'll go down the line here. We got some Adeptus Custards. So I think the new Pyrovore model is going to get a profile glow up. I mean, it's going to be a whole new codex, right, chat? I have a sneaking suspicion that most of the data sheets will be changed. I think they said that they would limit changes, but I would be shocked if if the model's not getting a new model would not be getting new profiles. Like the Biovore and the Pyrovore don't look anything close to what's on their datasheet right now. All right, Adeptus Custards. So this is a pretty classic Custodes list. If you watch Custodes play recently, this is like mostly what's going to be in their army. In terms of characters, we have Trajan, alongside a Blade Champion. The Blade Champion's pretty important just to speed up the Custodes units. I mean, we just talked about how bad movement restrictions are for them, but just being kind of a move 5 infantry army typically is a little bit frustrating. So this guy has a once per game advancing charge, so he can give you a little bit of a bump of speed to whatever unit he's attached to, which is super useful. He then also has Ceaseless Hunter, so he has a reactive move once per game. Bringing Guard to ATC. What secret tech do I think Guard can bring? Secret technology. It's a good question. I don't know if I could, if I have like a comprehensive knowledge of the Guard Codex enough to tell you exactly what their secret tech is. I do wonder if they're, I don't know. They need to be able to hold the center better than they do right now, and I wonder if there's like some sort of infantry composition that helps with that. But I don't 100% know. I don't know if I can give you super good advice off the cuff. A lot of your list is from 5th edition, trying to make a list with staying power. Yeah, so the Pentagram of Power. I'll make a video about it because I had one for 9th edition. I'll make a video for 10th edition. It's my every time I build a list, I have 5 different what's the word? 5 different like categories that I want to fulfill. I need a resilient. A tank, a resilient unit that can stand on an objective and not die, or stand on an objective and be unshootable is in 10th edition is the new like paradigm. You need a counterpunch, so if your opponent comes and does something to you, you need to be able to respond to it, so they can't just run at you and you don't do anything about it. That used to be like a melee unit, like a responsive melee unit, like a Vanguard Veteran Squad, but now it can be more short-range combat, so you know these flamer units and aggressors and stuff like that. You need offensive melee, so I think I called it disruption. You need the ability to be able to get onto an opponent's objective and stop them from scoring it. So fast units that are high OC, generally speaking, and you need range DPS. So if your opponent has something that can, if your opponent stands out in the open on an objective, you need to be able to punish them. Otherwise, they can do whatever they want all the time, and there's nothing you can do about it. So, and then you need utility. So cheap units that can do actions and hold objectives and go and score you victory points, but you don't care if they die. So those are the 5 criteria, and units can fulfill both. You can have a unit that's fast and cheap, that's both a utility unit and your melee unit, your disruption unit. And you can have like a tank that also has a bunch of, not a literal tank, like a tanky unit that has a bunch of flamethrowers on it that can be both your counterpunch and your tank. But you'll find that basically all the lists we talk about construct their armies in some way to have all 5 of those categories covered. And if you can do that, then your army's probably going to be pretty okay. Hoping we'll be able to fill the new weapons for the Termagant in whole units. I doubt it. I think those were, in the past, those were special weapons, and it doesn't look like the whole unit has them. It looks like they're like probably going to be a 1 per 10 or something. We'll see, though. I mean, who knows? All right. So this list in particular, it has the 2 characters, so Trajan and the Blade Champion, a big unit of Alaris Custodians. So these guys are important because they have basically rerolls against functionally the entire game, because they reroll against monsters, vehicles, and characters. So they're good into essentially every profile that you're going to run into. Most units have characters attached to them or as a monster or vehicle, so they always reroll their wound rolls. So that's very good. They also are good anti-infantry. So you're talking about dealing with things like Genestealer Cult. Almost every of these Genestealer Cult bricks is a huge infantry brick with characters attached. So the Alaris Custodians trigger their blast on their ballistic grenade launchers and reroll their wound rolls. So a unit of 5 Alaris Custodians is going to vaporize one of these units of Neophyte hybrids instantly. Just kill them immediately. And be difficult to kill on the crackback because they're a 2+ save with 4 wounds apiece at T7. Which is pretty solid. We then have 2 more units of 2 individual Alaris Custodians. Those are mostly there to score objectives and drop into your opponent's deployment zone. 2 big units of Wardens, 1 of 6 and 1 of 5. Excuse me. 1 unit of Wardens with 6 and a Vexillus. Interesting that the Vexillus in the Warden unit, you don't have to cut your spear for, but you do in the Custodian Guard unit. So these guys basically become OC3. These are the quintessential tank. They want to get onto an objective, activate their 4+, feel no pain, and just sit there for a whole turn and be unkillable and basically prevent enemies from taking the objective away. And then a Custodian Guard squad, which is 5 models, 2 Caladius Grav tanks, and a unit of Voidsmen at arms. So 3 big bricks of Custodians, a couple units of Alaris Custodians to fill gaps, and 2 Caladius Grav tanks to sit in the back and shoot twin-length laser beams at people all day. So ultimately, pretty standard Custodes build. Missed everything. Can I start again? You miss all the cool list reviews that I did, which is fun. Oh, speaking of which, I think somebody's looking for a list review. Who was that? Who was that who super chatted me last? That was Ryan. Ryan, let's talk about your list before we move on to talk about other Tyranids. I'm going to put it in paste bin. All right. High Fleet Tortellini. Delicious. I'd be worried about that naming convention, because then you want to eat your own Tyranid models instead of have your Tyranid models eat your opponent. So that's dangerous. We have a Hive Tyrant with Perfectly Adapted, Bone Sword, Lash Whip, and Monster Scything Talons. I'm gonna start you off there. That's a combination I love. That's what I play in my Hive Tyrant right now. Perfectly Adapted, I could take it or leave it. It makes him a little tankier, which is good, and it means he can reroll one of his 1s when he inevitably gets into melee and then flubs. But I found that like the heavy Venom Cannon, which a lot of people are running him with, is just so worthless that you never want to put him in line of sight to actually use it. So he only gets into melee like round 4, round 5 at the late game. And then you want him to do as much damage in melee when you get there. So already off to a good start. I love that. I like that Hive Tyrant build. Old One Eye. 2 units of 20 Termagants. That feels big. I don't know if I like 20s. 2 units of 5 Barb Gaunts. Is this meant to be 1 unit of 2 Carnifexes or 2 individual Carnifexes? Because I think you might want 1 unit of 2, because you want Old One Eye to be attached to them. Old One Eye attaching to 1 Carnifex is okay, but what it means is that if he loses his 1 Carnifex friend, he loses his rerolls, and I believe also loses the reactive move. So if your opponent one-shots the single Carnifex, he kind of falls apart, which feels really bad. And then you just have your opponent can sort of like piecemeal the unit apart rather than having to deal with all 3 of them. 1 Exocrine, 2 Maliceptors, 11 Neurogaunts, a Psychophage, 2 Psychophages. Holy crap! I don't know about those. And 2 units of 3 near Zoanthropes and Tyrant Guard. So I think I usually leave the Tyrant Guard at home, or I flip them for for Venom Thropes. They they hit okay, but they're expensive, and realistically what you want to be doing is making it so it's tough for your opponent to shoot the Hive Tyrant anyway. You kind of want to keep him safe, and I think you're just adding points to an already kind of over-expensive character. Where oftentimes if your opponent has the beef to kill the Hive Tyrant, they'll have the beef to kill the Tyrant Guard too, is what I found. That hasn't like super saved him. It also makes him more difficult to move around, and more difficult to actually hide, which has been a little awkward. So I ended up cutting the Tyrant Guard for my lists, which frees up a lot of points. 100 points goes a long way in Tyranids. I'm a little worried about the 20-man Termagant units. I think it might be better off to switch the extra 20 into 2 more units of 10 or some gargoyles. I think I found I like. And I would maybe put these Carnifexes together. The Psychophages, I don't have any experience with. I think I would say cut them probably, or at least 1. A lot of times, whatever's being shot at, you have 2 uses of the of the 5-up Feel No Pain, and the Psychophage is like doesn't stack with that because of the Hive Tyrant. So that's where I found a lot of my command points in Tyranids going, and so you end up like sort of having reduced use of the Psychophage if you're already getting the 5+ Feel No Pain. Your opponent doesn't usually target more than 2-ish things per turn anyway that you actually care about surviving. And so the Psychophages can keep the Termagant units alive, but I think that they are less efficient than just buying more Termagants. Actually, like, sort of significantly so. A Psychophage affecting an entire Termagant unit gets you on average like 5 Termagants back. Whereas 5 Termagants only costs you 30 points when you spent 125 on a Psychophage. I do like Horror Spexes in that slot though. Because they are actually they're harder to kill and are actually threatening. You could also take more Zoanthropes in that slot as well. Because you have the Maleceptors, moving the Maleceptors around the other Psychophages gets tough, so I like having more infantry. Oh, this Stinger sub wasn't the Carnifexes? Yeah, it's kind of implied. The free upgrades, like, you just always have them, basically. Which is whatever. Miss the weapons. Spine Fists. Yeah, I think the Spine Fists are actually kind of sweet. Because they're twin-linked, like, assault pistols, right? So you can always shoot with them, and they reroll wounds, which is great. The Tyrant Guard are sucky since finding out Warcom was wrong about how they worked. So yeah, one thing to keep in mind about the Maleceptor is that it checks for enemy units within 6 inches. So the Maleceptor actually has to be right up in front in order to protect anything. Which is why it sometimes gets tough to use with the Psychophages. Because you need to lead with the Maleceptor, but it's not the fastest thing in the world. So other monsters get stuck behind it. It's usually okay with the little gaunts, but it can get a little bit sort of clogged up, I've found, because they're only move 8. Inky is on Inky time, Chad. I can't dictate Inky time. And she's been shy today. She doesn't really want to be on camera. We had a couple little entrances from Inky, but not too many. Oh, speaking of which, she heard me talking about her. Now she's here. You want to come up? Come on up. No, she doesn't want to. Maybe? Come on. Come say hi to chat. Chat's asking for you. All your fans are here. Yeah, there she is. Inky time. It's like you, oh, she's like Bloody Mary. You say her name 3 times and she appears. Aw, no? Not today, maybe? Hi. Alright, well, there you go. Say hello. There she is. I think she just heard her name like 6 times, and she was like, what's going on? You talking about me? Now she's sitting right on my mouse hand. All right. So we talked about Custodes. Next up, we have Chaos Knights. This one's relatively straightforward because we're mostly just taking War Dogs, which is cool. We have a War Dog Stalker with Aura of Terror. So this is the locking objective enhancement. So this guy can, once he holds an objective at the start of the command phase, or at the end of the command phase, then he locks it in for the until you lose it again. Makes it super easy to push super aggressively. If your opponent doesn't have good deep striking, he can the army can just continuously throw bodies into the midboard, which is exactly what Chaos Knights want to do. 3, 4, 5, 6 War Dog Brigands. Let's take a look at the Brigand. I'll cop this one, chat. I always forget which War Dog has which set of weapons, so I always have to look them up. So the Brigand has an Avenger Chain Cannon and the Demon Breath Spear. These guys get +1 AP, targeting the closest eligible unit. And unlike Armigers, they are base ballistic skill 2. So they do pay an extra 5 or 10 points over an Armiger, but you do get that extra +1 to hit and potentially +1 AP. So they go to AP2 on the Chain Cannon. No devastating, but then AP5 on the Demon Breath, which means it punches through a 3+ save and cover entirely. So 6 of those. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 Huntsmen. So these guys, if I remember correctly, get +1 to hit if you are... reroll against monsters and vehicles. I think it's the Stalker gets +1 to hit if you're not within 6 inches of anyone else. But this guy just gets a buff against vehicles. He's got a Chain Talon in melee and a Demon Breath Spear in ranged. And baked in rerolls. Only 3+ weapon skill, ballistic skill on him though. And then 1 Carnivore, so all melee friend. And a couple demons to close things out. So the blue scribes and the changeling are the 2 that you usually see because they're deep striking load operatives, so they can't be shot and you can sort of put them wherever. The blue scribes, if I remember correctly, are also kind of fast because they're on a disc of siege. The Nurglings, unfortunately, don't have any objective control, so they're a little bit tough to get early game tactical objectives out of that don't require you to do actions, but they can do actions just fine. And they actually, once you're stuck in with a lot of the War Dogs, they can reduce you. They can give you -1 to hit. So if they engage you, so they can actually make it a little bit more difficult to engage in with the War Dogs themselves. So there's a good bit of synergy there between the two as well. So interesting to see Chaos Knights really, retain their identity as like the War Dog faction, whereas Imperial Knights are very much more focused on the big knights and the combination of bondsman abilities with the War Dogs too. The more things change, the more they stay the same, basically, when it comes to the Knight codexes. All right, does that move us on to Imperial Knights? Oh, we should talk about Tyranids because we talked about Tyranids with the list. So Odysseus here, our Tyranid Stan, rocking some Tyranids, trying to get the best use out of them. 3 units of Zoanthropes. I'm gonna be honest, chat. I think it feels to me like through 18 Zoanthropes is the backbone of Tyranids now, plus Biobores, of course. But they're just the fact that their profile splits between infantry and tanks, so they're good in. The only situation they're not good into is if your opponent has psychic defense, and otherwise they're good into basically every single matchup. But in Tyranids, a lot of times what you're doing is trying to dodge weird matchups anyway. So you kind of need the Zoanthropes because they both shoot at neophytes and stuff very well. 1 unit of Zoanthropes can pulverize 20 models pretty easily. And then they can also plow damage into a tank if they need to. So they're just good into the entire metagame, which is solid. And they're pretty good at rapid ingressing and coming off the side as well. 3 Biobores is a lot, but they can drop Swarm Mines and do Biobore stuff. I don't know, pretty useful. 2 Maleceptors, a unit of Tyrant Guard to go with the Hive Tyrant, who just has a Venom Cannon. Again, not a huge fan of the Tyrant Guard, but people play them. A Tyrannofex with Acid Spray. The big benefit of the Tyrant Guard, I think, is if you hit Knights. Because they can soak the shooting from towering for a turn. It should probably take at least 2 shooting activations to kill the Tyrant Guard from a Knight's army. So you get at least 2 full rounds out of the Hive Tyrant before your opponent kills it. The downside is the Hive Tyrant's not very good at hiding behind true line of sight blocking terrain because he has to go around it. But at least against Knights, you can give him an extra turn of operating. Or not have to hide him under a bridge in the back corner. So it's not all bad for the Tyrant Guard, but it is a little bit sad once they get stuck into melee. They kind of don't do much for 35 or 33 points a model or whatever. Let's see. The Maliceptors. I'm only one game deep with the Maliceptors myself, but I am impressed with them. Just having a pretty high volume gunshot is pretty useful. Anything with a high volume in Tyranids is good because it automatically synergizes with their detachment ability. An Acid Spray Tyrannifex to overwatch people in the middle of the table. 1 unit of Venom Thropes. These guys are especially useful protecting the Zone Thrope units because they can give them -1 to be hit. Giving cover to stuff is okay, but stuff usually gets cover anyway, so they don't really work with monsters quite as well, but they do work with the infantry units, so they're very good on like Gaunts, and they're very good on Zoanthropes. 3 individual Pyrovores, 30 points for a model is pretty good, and they have a Ignore Cover Flamethrower, which is sweet. And then an Exocrine to grant rerolls, 1 unit of Barb Gaunts, and 10 Gargoyles. A little bit light on the sort of Gaunt units, but overall I think a pretty standard Tyranid army. Basically shoots super hard within like 18 to 24 inches, so anything in the middle of the table would just get like plowed down by gunfire. But once you get stuck in there, it kind of folds a little bit. It's not that great in melee because the best like melee threats are the Hive Tyrant and the Maliceptors, I guess, which aren't even that good. But that's how 10th edition works, generally speaking. Not a lot of melee threats. All right. Then moving on, I think we do have some Imperial Knights. And that should do us for all the lists, right? We've talked about all of them. Hell yeah. All right, so Commander Cha-Cha, our resident knight extraordinaire. So here's the Castigator. We talked about it a little bit earlier. The Cerastus Knight Castigator. This thing is pretty nuts. Especially, we're running Mysterious Guardian on it, so it can deep strike and pick up off the table. And the Castigator itself has probably one of the best bondsman abilities available to Imperial Knights right now. So it grants you Sustained 1, which with your ranged weapons only, I believe, but that is functionally the same as +1 to hit. If you don't have any rerolls, there are reroll 1s available, obviously, for Imperial Knights, but if you don't have any rerolls, it is essentially identical mathematically to +1, and because they have rerolls, they're actually a little bit better. Then it also improves your armor penetration characteristic by 1. So if you could compare that to like the Atropos, I think, gives you Ignore Cover. It's strictly better and gives you Sustain. So it's like you stuck the Atropos and the Crusader's bondsman abilities together and got both of them. And that's what the Castigator does. And then on top of that, he also has a Twin Length Bolt Cannon. So he has a million shots. He gets his own sustained effect from bondsmaning someone. And he gets wound rerolls. So he's good into basically every situation. Hits super consistently, wounds relatively consistently, high AP, medium damage. Just good into every profile in the game, essentially. We then have a Knight Crusader with Unyielding Paragon, so -1 AP on it. With a Rapid Fire Battle Cannon and Avenger Gatling. Guy who made it is a competitive mastermind. Yeah, I heard he went 5-3 at Show Me Showdown. Could have been better, but, 5-3 is okay. 2 Armiger Helvrins, and then 4 Armiger Warglaves and a Calidus Assassin. So, yeah, good split between the Helvrins and the Warglaves. The Helvrins especially love sitting next to the Castigator and getting that buff. But I think, the buff is functionally good on both the Castigator and the Crusader, or from both the Castigator and the Crusader on any of these guys. But largely we're going to throw the Warglaves into the Meat Grinder to get blown up. The Castigator can sort of play in the mid-board because he also has a melee profile, unlike the Crusader, who sits in the backline objective. And then the Calidus Assassin does classic Calidus Assassin stuff that we've been talking about all day. May or may not have a super vect, just like Kairos Fate Weaver, but who knows? And that is, I believe, it for all the lists for the T5STU Season 7 Invitational. Good stuff. I'm excited. discussing the bracket specifically, obviously we have GSC versus Space Wolves twice. I hope that there's some secret Space Wolves technology here that can see them get out of this matchup, because if they can, that's going to be amazing. I think Odysseus versus Lord Solar is going to be really interesting. I want to see Lord Solar's Revenant Titan do cool stuff. I do think that is a little bit... That's going to be an uphill battle for Tyranids for sure. Breaking Titans open is tough for them already, and they don't really have the same level of trickery that Eldar does, so they're already kind of an uphill fight, but it is really low on the ground, that Eldar list, so I think that the path to victory is definitely like letting the Titan do its thing and trying to kill everything else and just score as many points as you can. Because that is one thing Tyranids have going for them is unit volume. They just have so many models on the table. We then have Space Wolves versus GSC again, Necrons versus Eldari, and Imperial Knights versus Necrons. Yeah, Necrons versus Eldari, I think it's a little bit slated to Eldari, but that is a Wraith Knight list. I don't know how well the Wraith Knight punches through the big warrior brick. It might be able to do it because it blasts into devastating wounds, but without the ability to ensure that you convert a bunch of devastating wounds, it might actually be a little tough. Although Zach is bringing all those missile launchers that we saw, right, on his Hornets. So he does have a lot of blast weapons to try to deal with the big warrior units. So might be good for him. Thousand Suns versus Eldar, I think is Thousand Suns, if anything, has the technology to deal with Eldar, and especially I think Flashback's variety of Eldar, where you have the big Wraithguard unit, but you only get really one shot out of the Wraithguard unit before it gets twisted, faded, and just ripped off the table. Thousand Suns are specifically good against exactly the kind of unit that Wraithguard are, so that might be a little bit slanted towards Thousand Suns in this case. I think that matchup is like pretty on edge between TS and Eldar, but I do think that they are relatively good into the Wraithguard compositions. We then also have Custodes versus Knights. That should be an interesting one. I think it is Custodes favored because Knights have very little way of engaging them in melee without getting eaten by the fight first. But they do have pretty reasonable shooting that's pretty good against Knights, with all of those rotary cannons and demon breath spears. So that's pretty good against Custodes, I should say. So and that's going to be an interesting one to watch. Imperial Knights versus Necrons is also going to be interesting. Raises variety of Necrons is really cool. Bringing a lot of little units makes it easier to hide against Imperial Knights, so I think it's going to be tough to get the bead on the big units that you want to. So I think that one's going to be good. And then a Genestealer Cult mirror match. At least we got one Genestealer Cult player knocked out from the get-go. But that one's going to be a good one because Genestealer Cult I think have so much interactivity between each other that it's going to be technically really cool, if a little bit less cool to see two factions fight each other. But that does mean that we won't see a Genestealer Cult mirror again until at least the semifinals, assuming the Genestealer Cults go the full way, and they may get bricked by Eldar. In fact, if they win and Eldar also win, they're staring down the barrel of Eldar in both situations. So we're really going to get a good look at how that matchup typically goes. So I'm psyched, chat. I think that this Invitational is going to be sweet. It's a whole new meta game where we're not locked into the presumptions of like past formats. So I'm excited to watch how these games happen. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close things out. So please tune in tomorrow starting 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So that is 21 hours, 20 and a half hours from now are going to be when those events start. And we're going to start streaming tomorrow. I don't believe I can send you to the event page, but maybe I'll find out. Oh, I can. Oh, cool. All right, here we go. So I'll send you right to the event page so that you can click to get notified when it goes live. And I will see you then. So big thanks for everyone who dropped super chats and we talked about your lists. Hope you got some good info from that. Remember to keep it classy, folks. Happy wargaming. And I will see you tomorrow. So cheers, everybody. And Inky also says goodbye.